AIT.
Hello and welcome to Global Matters. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Earlier this week, heads of government and states addressed the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly with a focus on global peace, security, economy, and sustainable development. The 78th session marks a crucial milestone in the journey of the United Nations towards achieving the 2030 agenda and the urgent need to put the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, back on track. As the world leaders gathered to engage in the annual high-level general debate under the theme Rebuilding Trust, Reigniting Global Solidarity, Accelerating Action on the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. The people of the world are eager to see the benefit of the high-level meeting. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, in his address at the United Nations General Assembly, called for equal and enhanced partnership between Africa and the rest of the world, an end to exploitation and pillage of African resources, an end to proliferation of arms into Africa, and support for democratic governance. Joining me to look at the key issues discussed at the general meeting. Now the world leaders are going to address many of the global concerns. Is Alistair Soyode, the former chair Nigerians in Diaspora Organization Europe. He joins me live from London. But before I bring in Alistair Soyode to join us to continue this discussion, let's quickly take a listen to this special report by Larry Babala, and I'll be back to have my guest in the studio.
Not a few of the world leaders who have mounted a rostrum at this General Assembly of the United Nations have spoken about it, the trade imbalance against developing countries of the world. Nigerian leader President Bola Tinubu has also hit on it.
Proclamations have been made, yet our troubles remain close at hand. Failures in good governance have hindered Africa, but broken promises, unfair treatment, and outright exploitation from abroad have also exerted a heavy toll on our ability to progress.
Now, what are the statistics available? According to figures from International Monetary Fund, IMF, Asia accounts for 38.1% of the global GDP, North America 29.1%, with South America 3.9% and Europe 23.6%. Leaving Africa with a paltry 2.8% and Oceania 1.9%. However, the value of world merchandise trade, according to figures from World Bank, rose by 12% to $25.3 trillion in 2022. This is inflated in part by high global commodity prices, while the value of world commercial service trade increased by 15% in 2022 to $6.8 trillion. Africa, despite the launch of its Continental Free Trade Area in 2018, arguably the world's largest free trade areas in terms of number of member countries, territories and population connecting 1.3 billion people across 55 countries, and a combined gross domestic product of $3.4 trillion as the short end of the stick globally.
When you look at the configuration of the global economy, between Europe and America, which is Southern America, I mean to say, account for almost 50% of the global GDP. So in other words, the remaining 50% is between Southern America, Asia, and part of Africa. And when you even further drill down, Africa only accounts for 3% of global GDP.
Yes, you may not have that very opportunities or the strength or capacity to play in the international global market. But where there is equity, it creates that room and opportunity for you to also participate. So Africa or the African countries are actually demanding some level of equity.
Adefolari Olamilekan says the component of trade, which include technological advancement and transfer, should be negotiated in bloc and not individually by African countries.
I want to believe that by the time each bloc comes to the table, an agreement will be sought. But we want to put it forward that Africans are still at the receiving end, because most of our negotiators don't know how to negotiate on a strong perspective or a strong point of Africa, but rather they end up negotiating on a weaker perspective, which doesn't give us the needed boost to go forward in this era. So for me, it is not about going to the round table and begin to talk about, and we are going to give you aid, we are bringing investment. Rather, Africans should negotiate on their strong perspective, on their strong point, whereby it is not about aid collection.
It's equity. There's nothing else to present. It's equity. Appeal to the consciousness of these developed countries to allow the developing country to also play in the same space. Like I said, give a quota. If you say that I will operate an airline, give a quota that Nigeria can fly to Dubai, fly to US.
Those parties on bilateral or multilateral basis, or with nationalism and protectionism still hold sway. September 2024 is just a year away to access progress or otherwise.
All right, thank you for taking the time to being part of the program. We just had that report from Lanre, my colleague there. But let's take a listen to some of the key issues raised by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu while he was making his address Wednesday at the General Assembly. Let's take a listen. Okay, all right. While we're trying to get that address by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I have my guest joining me from London, Alistair Soyode. Thank you, Dr. Soyode, for joining us on the program today. Good evening. Can I ask you to unmute yourself? I can't hear you. Good evening, Alistair. Can you hear me? No, but I can't hear you. May I ask you to unmute yourself? Okay, all right. Let's see if we can take the address by President Bola Tinubu while we resolve the audio connection issues with my guest in London.
On behalf of the people of Nigeria, I congratulate you on your well-deserved election as the president of this session of the United Nations General Assembly. We commend your predecessor, His Excellency Chaba Korochi, for his able stewardship of the Assembly also. We also commend His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his work seeking to forge solutions to humanity's common challenges. This is my first address before the General Assembly. Permit me to say a few words on behalf of Nigeria, my country, on behalf of Africa, my continent, regarding this year's theme. Many proclamations have been made, yet our troubles remain close at hand. Failures in good governance have hindered Africa, but broken promises, unfair treatment, and outright exploitation from abroad have also exerted a heavy toll on our ability to progress. Given this long history, if this year's theme is to mean anything at all, it must mean something special and particular to Africa. In the aftermath of the Second World War, nations gathered in an attempt to rebuild their war-torn societies. A new global system was born, and this great body, the United Nations, was established as a symbol and protector of the aspiration and the finest ideas of humankind. Nations saw that it was in their own interest to help others exceed the rubbles and wasteland of war. Reliable and significant assistance allowed countries emaciated by war to grow into a strong and productive society. The period was a high water mark for trust in global institutions and the belief that humanity had learned the necessary lessons to move forward in global solidarity and harmony. Today, for several decades, Africa has been asking for the same level of political commitment and devotion of resource that described the Marshall Plan. We realize that underlying conditions and causes of economic challenges facing today's Africa are significantly different from those of post-war Europe. We are not asking for identical programs and actions. What we seek is an equal, firm commitment to partnership. We seek enhanced international cooperation with African nations to achieve the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. There are 5 points I want to highlight. First, if this year's theme is to have any importance at all and any impact, global institutions, other nations, and their private sector actors must see Africa as a development priority, not just for Africa, but in the interest of us all as well. Due to both long-standing internal and external factors, Nigerians and Africa's economic structures have been skewed to impede development, industrial expansion, job creation, and the equitable distribution of wealth. If Nigeria is to fulfill its duty to its people, I know, and the rest of Africa, we must create jobs and the belief in a better future for our people. We are pushing for that. We must also lead by example, and we are doing so, to foster economic growth and investors' confidence in Nigeria, and remove the costly and corrupt fuel subsidy while also discarding a noxious exchange rate system in my first few days in office. Other growth and job-oriented firms are in the wings. I'm mindful of the transient hardship that reform can cause. However, it is necessary to go through.
All right, thank you for being there. We're trying to do a playback of President Bola Tinubu's address to the General Assembly sometime this week at the United Nations General Assembly 2023, where the theme of this year's meeting is rebuilding trust, reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. My guest, Alistair Soyode, is at the other side in London. Let's see if the connection is okay. Soyode, thank you so much for joining us. Let's see the connection now. Good evening.
Good afternoon. Good
evening. Oh,
evening.
Good. Thank God we finally got you there.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. The United Nations General Assembly this week, we had leaders, heads of government and state making speeches talking about global issues, including our own President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The question is, this is done every year. The world leaders that come together, they review national issues, they review international and global issues, and they come up with possible solutions. But it does appear the developing countries are not getting any better. What will change? Will anything change between the developed nation and the developed, underdeveloped, or the developing nations as these world leaders meet annually?
Well, thank you very much indeed. As you rightly mentioned, it's a yearly process where global leaders, more than 100 of them, congregate at the United Nations to speak and share their ideology about their country. And it is good as well, the president of Nigeria is saying this is his first time attending that event, other president, and of course, he has not spent a year in office yet. But when you look at the bigger picture about you mentioned almost 4 categories of development across the world. Nigeria definitely is seen as a major player, and Nigeria is not classified to be a country that does not have the resources, the capacity, the intellectual know-how of being a major player, not just on the African continent, but around the world. So looking at this, really, it gives Nigeria an opportunity, but not just Nigeria, as the president mentioned. He's talking as well collectively for the African nation. And again, when you look and listen to some of the major speakers, especially the leading woman prime minister in the world, especially from the Caribbean, Barbados prime minister, likewise talking about the challenges, but not just the challenges that is facing smaller nation, but asking the so-called advanced Western nation to treat every country as equal partner, especially on what these countries are bringing onto the table. So, I mean, for us as the diasporan community looking at this, we do hope that our African leaders, being present there, listening to all the global speakers as well, and president, and sharing the achievement that they are recording in their different countries, that Africa and by and large Nigeria can benefit hugely from not just speaking at the table, but exercising their right to do what is right for the people. And again, Mr. Tunde, if you follow, you could have heard quite a lot of them are talking about leadership. So most likely, hopefully, it is now for Africa to really allow quality leaders that have shown capacity, they've shown merit, they've shown integrity to be there to lead their countries on the African continent, and by and large, collectively making Africa proud, which Africa should be.
President Tinubu, while he was addressing the assembly, spoke about the Western world or the developing world stopping the pillage of African resources. He was charging them to say, look, no more coming to Africa to exploit African resources, to bring arms into Africa that fueled crisis in the country. Acknowledge the fact that, look, that's a problem in Africa. We have people out there who come to Africa, who take our resources, African resources. But my question to you is the problem with those who come into Africa, or the problem is with African leaders that allow its resources to be pillaged, that allow people to come in and exploit its resources, that allow the developed nation to come in and steal its resources? Who should we blame?
Well, let's be realistic. Every human being is looking for better things in life. Every person that goes to school is because he believes at the end of their educational qualification, they will get a better living standard as they progress in life. So it would be wrong for anybody to think, as of today's day, that any country, be it in Africa, be it in the Western nation, that is coming to your country, to your location, and taking away your resources, that you want to blame them. Time for that blame should be over. Why? Because at least now, on the African continent, we have experienced, qualified, expert professionals who knows what the international community are seeking. Africa has got the resources, yes, and we want to sell our resources, then we sell it to the highest bidder. And it is time for us as Africans to stop blaming not just the Western nation, even in our own countries on the African continent. We have people who marginalize the other ethnic group. We have people who feel that they need to be there rather than based on merit, based on integrity, based on accountability, based on proper process of getting to a stage on office. So we have to be realistic to say it is time for Africans to play the role seriously and compete with the global community. For example, when you talk about Nigeria, we're talking about the natural resources in Nigeria. And of recent, the Minister of Mineral Resources was talking about the capacity and the opportunity and the abundance of natural resources, minerals in Nigeria, to the tune of maybe 900 million. But the reality, 900 million billion.
Billion
But the
dollars.
reality is, billions. But the reality is the resources in Nigeria actually surpass $1 trillion. We're talking about the natural resources, more than 100 different minerals in Nigeria. So we have the capacity just in this single country called Nigeria to generate revenue beyond $2 trillion in capacity. So we have it. And it is time for our leaders, our professionals, our service providers, our companies to have the government facility, which means the enabling environment that government can provide for our companies to be able to challenge and compete with the international community. Earlier in some of your Vox Prov, your top people are talking about, for example, the airline industry. In the airline industry, do we have airlines, companies in Nigeria that can compete with the international community? The answer is yes. But maybe then they don't have enough plane, but at least they do have the capacity to compete. But again, Barrister, I would like us to not just say because we are, and people should allow us to play a role in the international community. The international community, for example, now has put a process whereby in order for you to compete, you must reach a certain level of international requirement and provision. So our countries, our businesses, our leaders likewise should support those who can get to that international standard so that they can compete favorably with the international community.
Right. Thank you so much. A good place to end the program today. I'm so sorry because of the time we were trying to deal with the technical issue, but it's a good place to end that. Enough of lamentation. African leaders should stop lamenting. We should stop crying now. Nobody's going to come to Africa to help Africa develop. No one is going to come to Nigeria to develop Nigeria. Africa and indeed Nigeria can only be developed by Nigerians and in Nigeria. Thank you so much. A good place. Enough of lamentation. African leaders going out there lamenting, looking for people to come develop the continent when we are aligned others to come in and take care of our resources. It's time we looked inward. Alistair Soyode, Dr. Alistair Soyode, former chair, Nigerian Diaspora Europe. Thank you for your time on the program today, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's how far we can go. I apologize for the short time because of technician we needed to deal with. So we'll come your way again. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.